All right, welcome everybody. By my clock, it looks like it's right on time for us to go ahead and start. It does look like we still have a lot of people still logging into the webinar. So let me go ahead and start with a little bit of kind of housekeeping and kind of setting expectations. First off, thank you so much for joining with us. Let me throw my information up there. My name is Mike Hamilton. I'm the crazy voice you're going to be hearing for the next hour. But before we even dive in, let me kind of make sure people are in the right webinar. When we launch a new version, we always do two different versions of the webinar. There is one that focuses entirely and exclusively on just the new features in the new release. That one is actually up on the website. It was recorded. It's available as a recording. This one is geared more to the new prospective user, and it's going to be a combination. Half of our time we're going to say just, okay, what is this Flare thing I've been hearing about? What are the benefits? How does it work? And then we'll spend about half of our time looking at, okay, and here's the cool new stuff that was just released. So if you're looking for the kind of introductory webinar, which is half what is Flare, half what is the new stuff, you're in the right place. If you're looking for a full hour of just what's the new stuff, well, that one was actually done earlier. It was live, but we did record it, and that recording is available on the website. All right, so that's a bit of kind of setting expectations. As far as my background, I've had it on screen for a minute. Hopefully you had a chance to read that, but the short version, my education is actually in physics of all things. How did I end up not only in technical communications, but the software side of technical communications? Well, I found out way back in the 1980s that when you work at a nuclear power plant and you complain the most about how bad the reactor plant operating procedures are, they put you in charge of the technical publications library. And that sent me skittering off in a whole new career direction. From there, I went on to become part of the original RoboHelp team. I was the product manager from 1997 until 2005. Went through the whole Macromedial debacle where they acquired the RoboHelp product, the company. A year later, new CEO changed their mind. They fired us all. And that was when I became one of the founders over here at MadCap Software and have been with MadCap ever since. All right, so that's my background. Let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda that we have planned out for this session. Well, actually, I back up a little bit. This is the hybrid, so we are going to start with the overview of what Flare is. For the overview, I'm going to focus on kind of the core benefits that the Flare software even brings to the table. I mean, why would somebody even look at using our software? Well, the primary reason people like us is content reuse. A lot of old techniques didn't have, a lot of word processing type techniques didn't have a lot of content reuse capabilities. So as a result, you end up with all this different content all over the place. You know, it starts to contradict each other. Edits get remembered in one spot, they get forgotten in another spot. Big mess. So that's one of the key problems that we solve. In our system, content only exists one time. No matter how many different manuals you publish that share that content, well, for editing purposes, that content only exists one time. The second core benefit is the multi-channel publishing capability. The old days of being able to produce a manual, singular, are kind of long behind us. Today, the same procedural content, the same overview content needs to be published in traditional manuals, in software help systems, in knowledge base articles, in websites, in ebooks running on tablets. We have to be able to support all these different delivery channels with our content, and that is the other problem that MadCap Flare solves. I can write content once, and then at a moment's notice, I can publish to the website or to a PDF or to an ebook or to an online help system, whatever format that particular customer needs. And then the third thing that we do is we try to bring as much ease of use to this process as we can. We're not the first tool to work in the content management space, but traditionally, making that dive into content management usually involved lots of consultants, months and months of getting things ready, new enterprise servers, new network controls. It was a pretty huge undertaking. We're bringing content management to a level that it can be installed on a single author's desktop, import some existing content, and start doing multi-channel publishing that very afternoon if you want to. And I'm actually going to prove it. When we do the live demo, I'm going to import 4 Microsoft Word documents. That way you can see the import process. I'll demonstrate the editor a little bit if you want to edit or change any content. And then we'll turn right around, and the content we imported from Word, I will publish as a website, as an online help system, and as a PDF. And we'll do that whole process in about 10 minutes. All right, so those are the core benefits that we bring to the table. But before we dive into the live software, though, I like to start with some of the kind of fundamental concepts. So as I mentioned, in the old days, we had multiple source publishing, and it was a bit of a mess. And the problem with a word processing type workflow is there is no content reuse. So what typically happens, somebody will write just a beautiful document, and then somebody on the executive team calls up and says, yeah, we kind of need 2 different versions. So what typically happens, you end up making a copy or a clone of the document. Maybe out of that 200-page document, only 5 pages need to change. But because of 5 little pages, you now have 2 complete copies of the entire document. And so if any of the common area changes, you have to remember to edit it in 2 separate places. And that's a pain, but it's manageable, I guess. Well, at least now it is. The problem is, if these documents start to multiply any further, it just gets way out of hand, way out of control, way too fast. You practically have to keep a separate spreadsheet to keep track of what content is in which manual, because if policy number 14 changes, you have to make sure you update policy 14 anywhere it was used. So that's just manual, it's tedious, it just doesn't work. So big, not symbol on that workflow. This is the workflow that Flare will get you out of. The problem with this word processing workflow is you're actually working on the right-hand side of this diagram. You are hand editing. You are hand touching every single one of these documents. And that's where the inefficiency comes in. With content management workflows, or with Flare, we move back to the left-hand side of this diagram. Our content only exists one time, and we edit and maintain it in that single place. Now, we can still get all of the individual customer versions, but instead of us doing it by hand, the software will prepare those for us. Now, that's big talk, big promises. How in the world can we pull this off? Well, when you work in Microsoft Word, even on the left-hand side of this diagram, you're actually doing 3 things at once, even though you may not realize it. You're writing the content, yes, that's what everybody thinks of, but you're also embedding all of your formatting, and you're defining the overall scope of the document. And what Scope, what do I mean by that? Well, if I'm writing a training manual, it's always going to be a training manual. If I'm writing an installation guide, it's always going to be an installation guide. I mean, what the document is gets ingrained into that word processor document. In Flare, it doesn't. We take those three components, the content, the formatting, and the scope, and we actually separate them into three separate areas. Sounds scary, but it's actually not. It's not any more work than what we have to do in a word processor. So I'll focus on content first. And in Word or any word processor, you're doing what's known as linear authoring. You start on page 1, type, type, type. You get to page 200. You call it a manual. Well, things don't work quite that way in a content management world. We follow a model known as topic-based authoring. Again, it sounds scary. It's not any different than what we're already doing in a word processor. We just have to think in smaller chunks of content. But if I look at that big 200-page Word document that's a manual, it's probably already broken down into chapters. So maybe I have 6 chapters. Well, let's just look at Chapter 3. Chapter 3, perhaps it contains 2 procedures and 2 reference sections. Well, those 2 procedures and those 2 reference sections that make up Chapter 3, that would be perfect as 4 of these individual topic files. So instead of one long linear document, in content management authoring, you end up with this pool or this library of these smaller topics. And they can relate to each other any way that I need them to. So if I am building that particular manual that I was speaking of, and I need to recreate Chapter 3, well, I can grab my 2 procedure topics, my 2 overview topics, I can stitch those 4 topics back together, and boom, there's Chapter 3. But if I want to extract just the 2 procedures, and I want to reuse those as 2 knowledge base articles up on the website, well, now I can. So that's one of the nice things. Oh, I just got a note. Am I connected over VoIP or telephone? I'm actually connected over telephone. I try to avoid using the VoIP connection as a presenter just so we don't have any dropouts. So I did see that note in the chat window there. I should probably point out, if you do have live questions, there is a Q&A window as part of the webinar software. So if you want to type in questions, I have a couple of people kind of helping me in the background. They can help answer questions. And as well, if I spot one out of the corner of my eye, I have a second monitor up, I can grab those as well. So you are free to ask questions during the webinar. I forgot to mention that up front. Now, if you're viewing this as a recording, if you have any questions, just shoot those to sales@madcapsoftware.com. If the salesperson can answer it, they will. If they can't, they can forward it over to tech support or one of the evangelists. All right, so but back to this concept. By just breaking this linear, giant 200-page document down into these smaller topics, we get a lot more flexibility. Now, that's great for about 80% of our customers. But the other 20%, they need to go a step further than just making the content modular. So let's say this topic up here, objects and inheritance. Well, maybe we sell 2 different versions of our product. They're both going to have this topic, but there might be a slight difference between the 2 versions. Well, here's where you have to be careful. Your old Microsoft Word instincts are to start duplicating things, making copies of topics. Don't do that. Resist that urge. Content should only exist once. So how in the world can we manage these differences? Well, that takes us to the next big concept, what are known as single source publishing techniques. And that's just a big fancy industry buzz phrase that means I'm going to put all content for all of my audiences in this one topic. What? That sounds like chaos. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. The way this works, I will write my procedure one time. I will then add into that procedure any content that is unique to audience A. Maybe I have a special introductory paragraph that's only for, audience A. And then I have an alternate opening paragraph. I put a different color code on it and say, okay, this is only for audience B. So this way, I can work on this very much like a word processor. I can just, create content natively, but by color coding that content, I can actually say, okay, this content is special for this reason, this content is special for that reason. And here I've tagged it by audience, but maybe this bottom paragraph, maybe I want that included if I produce a PDF, but I don't want that included if I publish to a website. So it doesn't matter why content is unique. If it is, I simply create a label and identify it. Now this is great for the author, but I can't give this to a customer like this. Well, that's also something that's different. In a word processor, you physically hand edit the very file that you deliver. In content management, you don't. We actually have master copies that we edit and maintain. That's what I have on screen right now. But to get to a customer version, we have to go through a publishing step. And the first step of publishing is creating something called a publishing target. And it's just basically a fancy name for what is a recipe. I want to go in here, so right now this target, well, this is for the audience A, the green audience, and I'm targeting mobile phones. So I want to include anything marked in green. I want to exclude anything marked in red or blue. And then I can also pull in a dedicated style sheet, any dedicated templates that are optimized for a mobile phone experience. But if I need another derivative document, I don't duplicate anything. I just add a second recipe, a second publishing target. Now this time, I'm going for the red audience, audience B, and I'm publishing to the web browser. So I include anything in red, I remove anything in green or blue, and now I pull in the styles and the templates for the web browser. And if I need a PDF, well, that would just be a third target. I could keep adding targets to satisfy all of my variations in publishing. So once the content is written and the targets are written, well, now it's just publishing on demand. If somebody wants the green audience content running on a mobile phone, well, let's process the first target, and what I get is just the correct content, but styled and templated for the phone experience. If somebody wants the second target, I can publish the audience B and the generic content, but now it's running inside my web browser with all the controls, the search, all of that automatically. And if I want a PDF, I just invoke the third target, and now I get all the correct content formatted and styled for a PDF experience. Now, I hope it's obvious, but I always feel like I kind of have to mention, on the right-hand side, I have included those color codes just for continuity in the slide. but realistically, none of those colors would exist in the customer documents. I just wanted to show what content was being included. But that's the big picture. It doesn't have to be any harder than that. Some people get a little overwhelmed. They try to do too much too fast. But at a basic level, that's it. We just modularize how we write, so I have better content reuse. I produce these publishing targets. That way I can get the multi-channel benefits. And when this all comes together, I now have a publish on-demand system. The best part, even though I publish 3 different versions now, if the engineers call up and I have to make an edit or I have to make a change, well, I edit the master copy and the software is smart enough to even tell me, based on that change you just made, all 3 of these targets need to be republished. The kind of ripple effect of your change is you have impacted all 3 of these documents. All right, so those are the big picture kind of concepts. When it gets to the real world workflow, for most companies, it's usually a 3-step process. Rarely are people lucky enough just to start fresh. So the first step is usually importing existing content. And we do have various importers. Probably the big ones are the Microsoft Word importer and the loose HTML file importer. There are several others. If you have any loose DITA XML content, just point us at the DITA map. We can pull that in. If you have any FrameMaker files, just point us at the book or the FM files. We'll actually leverage the FrameMaker app, use it as a processor, update those to structured frame, XML, and then we'll pull that content in. Or if you have any old RoboHelp projects, For-Help projects, Doc-to-Help projects, anything like that, we can even extract those files and import that content. So we want to pull in everything that you have initially. Now, I did notice a question in the Q&A window: can we import InDesign docs? Currently, the answer is no. We don't have a dedicated importer. Do we have efforts in that direction? We don't officially comment on anything in the pipeline, but if I was a betting person, I'd say that's a pretty good guess. However, that doesn't mean we can't get InDesign content into Flare. I've already helped lots of customers. It tends to optimize one of 2 ways, and I would experiment with both, but InDesign does have a save as feature with several options. You can save as HTML. We can then use our HTML importer to bring the content in, or InDesign has a save as RTF feature, which is the original format of Microsoft Word documents. You can save as RTF and then use our Microsoft Word import capability. So once we've done our imports, we get the content in. Well, then I'll show you the live Flare editor, how I can edit and change content, but more importantly, add any of that metadata. And then finally, on the publishing side, more different output types than just about anybody would ever need. I don't know of anybody who uses them all. The big ones, though, are the straight to PDF and straight to modern web browser content. You know, fully supportive of responsive design, fully supportive of accessibility requirements. Those are probably the big 2. Now, coming up fast on its heels are the ebook formats. Those are becoming more and more popular as well, but lots of output formats supported. But with that, I'm getting a little long-winded here. Let's jump into the live portion. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a copy of Flare. Actually, let's just jump out to the desktop here. I'm going to launch a fresh copy of Flare. That way you know there's nothing up my sleeve. Now when it opens, it's just going to open to a blank workspace. I said I would start with 4 Word documents, so I'll say File, New Project, from Word Documents. I can name it whatever I want. I can choose my storage options, 3 choices. I could store locally on my hard drive, run it like a word processor on steroids, or I could store it on a network drive where we could have, multiple authors collaborate, or we could store it in a database on the network, a source control database, and then we get full content management with, rollback capabilities, tracking of all edits, true enterprise level functionality. But your choice of which of those 3 storage options, and if you change your mind, you can move between those 3 models anytime that you want. I'm going to keep it simple, put it on my local drive for this demo. Click Next. Now Flare says, okay, where are these Word documents? I'll click the little green plus sign. I'll navigate out on my hard drive. Let's go to the computer D. There we go. I'm going to grab some Word documents here. Now I'm going to intentionally make kind of a beginner mistake. 3 of these documents are coming from the engineers. They're using stock Microsoft Word. 1 of these documents is coming from the marketing department. They have heavily customized their Microsoft Word template. So I'm going to choose all 4, click Open, and when I click the Next button, that's going to trigger Flare to process and scan these Word documents, getting ready for the import. Now for the first real decision point. Flare says, okay, some of these Word documents are kind of long. Flare is really optimized for smaller topics. Do you want Flare to break these big Word documents into the smaller topics automatically during the import? Oh, yes, please. Well, here are all of the styles that can be used to automatically break up those Word documents. Now, you can try this as many times as you want to. I'm going to grab the heading 1 style, click the blue arrow, and move that to the right. Now, a lot of people will start there, but in my experience, that's usually not small enough. I get topics, but they're way too large. So I'm also going to select my heading 2 styles as well. I find that's at least a good starting point when trying to process a Word document, especially if you haven't seen it before. Although I have a wrinkle here, though. Remember I mentioned one of those Word documents was coming from the marketing team. Well, apparently they've customized their heading 1 and their heading 2, so they're down below. Well, I can grab those as well. So even if these content files are coming from different Word templates, we can still accommodate that. So with those settings in, I'll click the Finish button. Flare just processed those 4 Word documents. On the left, I can see all of the files that are going to be created, and by selecting any one of them, I get a preview over on the right. So this is a way that you can spot check, make sure that the topics are the right size, make sure that the document is being split correctly based on how you want the content. And if you are unhappy for any reason, just click Cancel. That will take you right back to your import wizard, and you can readjust your settings and try again. But this actually looks like it's worked out pretty well, so I'm not going to hit Cancel. I'll click Accept. And there you go. That is the import process. So I now have imported 4 Word documents, but they were automatically broken into these multiple topics. I can open as many topics as I want, just by double-clicking, and it opens up as new tabs in the interface, just like you would expect in a modern, web browser type interface. So this way I have access to all of my files, and I can edit any of the pages that I want. So that will transition into that authoring and editing phase. Well, this is where Flare is a bit odd. The editor doesn't work one way, it works about 4 different ways, depending on the skill of the author. So the way this works, it defaults to word processor mode. In word processor mode, if I want to add some content, just like in Microsoft Word, I'll put my cursor after paragraph 1, press the enter key. I can just type content. I've just added 3 paragraphs. If I want to make that into a list, I'll just highlight those 3 lines. Just like in Word, I'll say, I want a numbered list. And boom, I get a numbered list. Inserting images, tables. We've tried to make it look, act, and feel as much like a word processor as we can. People don't even have to know that it's XML technology behind the scenes. I did just see a question pop in. Well, what if you only want to import a few pages from that Word document? Not a big deal. Just import the whole thing. It will come flying into a folder, but just grab the 3 or 4 pages that you want, move those anywhere in the project you want, and you can just delete the leftovers in the folder. So we don't have a way to kind of selectively pull that in, but it's not that, extra time consuming or anything. It doesn't add any more to the process. So that's a way to handle if you just need a few pages. All right, I'm kind of going along here. So to ramp this up, once you've outgrown the basic editor, well, I'm going to turn on what are called the structure bars. Now, in an XML world, having access to document structure is powerful. Most tools, however, force you into kind of a pseudo code view where you see a bunch of raw text and a bunch of these markers. Our focus group testing, way back in the beginning showed us that people just hate working that way. For those who do like it, it is available, as you can see, but for everybody else, we came up with the structure bars. It is graphical. It's in the left margin. It does not contaminate my editor, but I now have access to all of the raw code blocks. So if I want to move item 3 here, if that should be in position 2 in my list, well, even in Microsoft Word, I was now stuck doing the cut, copy, paste, break list, fix list dance, whereas here with these structure bars, I can just click and drag that LI block. Anywhere I drag that list item block, that blue arrow will show me where it's valid to drop a list item. If I let go of my mouse button, well, boom, item 3 is now in position 2. Now that's a little silly on a list like that, but imagine being able to do that with a great big table, being able to just drag and drop entire rows or entire columns without messing up the formatting of the table. Or, giant, lists that are, 20 procedural steps, just being able to reorganize procedural steps if you need to with a simple drag and drop. So a lot of power in that structure bar. And we're quite proud. It took about 8 prototypes over 2 years to develop this, and we do hold a patent on it. So we're pretty proud of that. But in any case, so that was a brief introduction to the editor. We can also do access to code views, optional. You only have to go this far if you want to, or if you just want, instead of a split screen, the 4th mode is an actual pure code view. But again, this is one of those things that maybe 5% of our customers even use. It's there if you want it, but it's never mandatory. All right, so I could go on, but let's fast forward. We've looked at importing. We've looked briefly at the editor. How do I get a document now? How do I stitch this content back together? Well, the first thing we need is a table of contents file. I haven't really talked about these yet, but this is basically an outline to teach Flare what topics do I want and how should they be organized. Now, this one was created for me when we imported those Word documents. So I can use this as a base, or I could just delete this and start over. So I can have as many different table of contents files as I need for all of my publishing. Well, I kind of like the one that was created for me. The problem is it's a little boring. Let's add some levels to it. Now, if you're a drag and drop type person, if I want types of firewalls to be under about firewalls as kind of a content node or a chapter, well, I can just grab types of firewalls, drag it to the right, and boom, it just became a child of about firewalls. Now, unfortunately, I've just kind of crossed the 50 mark recently with a bit of carpal tunnel. So if I do too much drag and drop, my list gets real angry. But that's why my engineers are awesome. They put these blue arrows in the toolbar for me. So cranky old people like me don't have to do so much drag and drop. And using these blue arrows, I can burn through here pretty quick and create pretty much any outline or structure that I want. So now I have 3 different sections of content for web publishing, or these could be 3 chapters if I produce a PDF. And I saw a note, is there a maximum number of conditional tags? Nope, you can get as crazy as you want. I think the most I've seen is we had one customer I did an on-site with, and they had about 300 different conditional tags that they were using. Of course, at that level, it's not the computer that has problems. You have to make sure that the humans can manage that number of tags. Flare doesn't care. It's pretty smart. All right, so now that I have this table of contents the way I want it, I'll save that and close it. Well, now we'll jump into our targets. Now, a lot of people get a little overwhelmed when they try to learn Flare. There are a lot of controls. But here's the good news. Everything from the factory is pre-configured to a safe setting. So even though I have all these tabs and all of these crazy options that I can set, well, the good news, you don't have to set any of them. They are all pre-loaded with safe defaults. So if I just go to the target and I click the build button, well, what build tells Flare is to start processing these files and build the web system for me. Once it finishes, I'll hit View Output, and I'll choose Internet Explorer. And here is the web system that we just built. So this was 4 Microsoft Word documents just 10 minutes ago. That table of contents I created was converted to a drop-down menu system for me automatically, so I can navigate any way I want. The search capability was built in automatically if I do a search. Well, the search results are very, very Google-esque, comfortable for anybody. And as far as the look, you'll notice it says your logo here. This whole thing is designed for you to change the colors, change the backgrounds, change the logos to match your look and feel. So question, can I show a compilation to a phone real quick? Oh, I'll go a step beyond that. Rather than this nice, tricky, flashy web portal type interface, let's close this. Let's do a more traditional kind of a knowledge-based type look, to do that, I'm going to make one quick change. I'm going to go to the Skin tab, and Skin is just the name for the web template, and instead of the default one we just looked at, I'm going to select Tripane. With Tripane selected, I'll save, and I'll build again. Same exact process, same exact content, but if I hit View Output this time, well, instead of drop-down menus, it now has that more traditional table of contents on the left side that I can use to navigate. But Christopher was asking about phone support. Well, check this out. It has actually detected that it's running in a full-size web browser on a computer desktop. So I see everything. But if I shrink this down, see if I can drag this little window. Once this hits tablet size, it auto-adapts. So right now, I can see my content. I can see, full width. I still have my toolbars. I can still print. And there's a little hamburger menu now for navigation. I can bring back my navigation, my search, my index, my table of contents, select a new topic. Once I've chosen my new topic, it goes back to full screen mode. So this way we can leverage the full real estate of that tablet. But tablets, it's pretty common to be able to print. They're usually connected over a LAN or a Wi-Fi network. Phones, not so much. So what happens if this goes down to a phone size? Well, everything adapts. I can still read all my content. I still have my hamburger menu for navigation. I can get all that back. But notice my little print icon is gone. A lot of phones can't print. They just don't have the drivers installed. So this interface automatically adapted. So kind of coming back to the question that was posted, can we compile to a phone? There's actually no need. Our output is compiled to optimize itself on whatever device it's viewed on. And then the other question, can you customize the left-hand pane? You can customize the whole interface. If I'm way behind on time, but that's okay. If I pull up some quick customer samples, I can show you just how crazy you can get with some of this. Okay, so here is Ectron. They mainly just focused on changing the color schemes. But notice on the left right now, they're still using the normal book and page icons. But if I go to Smart Music, well, not only did they update the color scheme, but they've changed out the book and page for triangles and circles because that was the look that they wanted. If you want to add an additional tab, you can. You can, like here, with they've hidden the glossary, they've hidden the index. If I go to MPay, well, they've added a glossary because that's something they wanted, but they've even gone in and customized every little icon on the toolbar. So you can modify this pretty much any way you want. And then if we go back to that portal look, well, that is even more flexible, and you can just pretty much copy the look or the feel of just about any website that you might want. All right, so that's two different web publishing modes. I see a couple more questions, but I apologize. I'm going to have to keep pushing forward here, or we're going to run out of time before we get to the new stuff. The last thing I want to show is the multi-channel publishing side. We're publishing web content. It's working beautifully. Here's how quick and easy it can be. I'm going to take my web target. I'm just going to right-click and copy, right-click and paste. I just cloned or copied my target file. In the new version, I'll rename it PDF. Now it's still showing that HTML5 icon, so let me double click and open it in the editor on the right. And I'm just going to make one change to the output type. Instead of HTML5, I'm going to select PDF. With that change, I'll hit the build button one last time. Same process, but it's now building a PDF file for me. Once it's finished, view output. And of course, it opens on the wrong monitor, so let me pull this over. There we go. So here it is inside of Acrobat Reader. The table of contents was created for me. The bookmarks panel in Acrobat Reader was created for me. And even though it's all black text, they're all clickable links. So if you are viewing this electronically, if I click on Application Gateways, it will jump right to that page. And then just to show off a little bit, one of those Word documents I imported, it actually had a Microsoft Word index marker field code in it. Not only were we able to extract and keep that, but if I go down to the bottom, the last page, it's added a proper index at the back of the book. Question about branding, headers, footers, page numbers, all of that, fully supported. Don't have time for it here. There's a special page template called a page layout. That is a bit more kind of InDesign-like. It's very graphical, but you can have custom headers for odd versus even pages, custom chapter start pages. So that would be the area to look into, a page layout template. To make this a fully featured PDF, I would have probably another 40 minutes worth of work. I'd want to create a cover page, a copyright page, because right now it's just jumping straight into content. And I would also want to create one of those page layout templates to control my headers and footers. But I really need to finish up with the live demonstration part because we have to get back into the slides. I mean, that's one of the core reasons for this presentation. I've already used up too much time. All right, major new features. That's the introduction. What's the cool new stuff that was just released? Well, there's some of it I knew I wouldn't have time for. I just call it a bucket of cool new stuff. So there's a list of things I'll just talk to quickly. Once we've talked to that list, there's a new multilingual capability. For our customers who do translations, this is going to be a huge time saver. Instead of having to publish the English version, the French version, the Spanish, I now publish the English version and all of the linked languages publish themselves now. A new redesigned style sheet editor. Time permitting, I'll show that quickly. A new responsive layout editor. I showed how that the interface would adapt between tablets, phones, and desktops. Well, you can make your content adapt as well. Changes to snippets with variables and conditions, and the ability to preserve tracked changes in outputs. Okay, those are the big ones. The bucket of cool new stuff. These are the ones I'm going to tear through quickly. 64-bit support. Flare has been multi-threaded for a while, but it still has been a 32-bit app. For the first time this year, it's now a true native 64-bit app, so full access to all of your memory, everything else. It just sets it up to scale for the next decade. Build log save. Flare always saves a build log, but it always saved it in the build folder. Customers asked, well, we'd rather save it into a reports folder over on the server. You can now save the build log anywhere you want if you're using our automated build process. Byte order mark. This is really for cranky old Unix web servers. There were ways to do it in the past. You had to know how to set up your operating system correctly. We've bypassed all that. You can now just go into your output, tell it to use byte order mark, and boom, it's done. Drop-down expanding text enhancements. This is really for existing customers. We've already had these capabilities, but it was about a 3-step process to add one of these effects. Now we have it down to a single step. It's just more efficient, it's faster. Oh my gosh, glossaries. We've had glossary support for a while, pretty basic, but we've just ramped it up to a whole new level. You can now do, alternate sorts on glossaries. You can now use metadata inside glossary definitions that we couldn't use before. Conditional markers, just glossaries were ramped up to a whole new level. Ability to link to styles. This is something that doesn't really exist in an XML, HTML5 world, but we kind of invented this. If I'm on page A and I want to link to page B, but I want to link halfway down that page to something that is styled p.codesample, I can link directly to that spot. I don't have to put in a bookmark first. I don't have to do anything. This way I can link to any custom style on any other page. And select skins at runtime. Briefly, I showed you how some customers had modified those skin files. Well, up until this release, you were able to produce one skin file. And that was it. That was your look and feel. We had the request, of all people, it was somebody who was documenting a driving application. And that driving application had a day mode and a night mode using different contrast settings. And they really wanted to be able to publish the same content, but with 2 separate skins. They wanted a high contrast skin and a low contrast skin. Well, we've kind of ramped that up, so now you can have as many skin files as you want, and you can let the customer choose at runtime. There's a little button now where they can just toggle through the skin files if you want. And then smart quotes. This is really more for the translation folks. Different languages render quotes differently. So now we can handle the smart quotes. All right, so now the big stuff. Multilingual web and print publishing from a single project. Well, in old versions, you would write the original project, and since my core language is English, I would write in English. You could use any language you want. But then you would send it off to translation, and when it comes back, you would then also have a French Flare project and a Spanish Flare project, at least in my case. The problem was I would have to remember to build all 3 versions, or I would have to go manually build some type of automation to achieve this, some kind of script or something. We heard from customers that said this has to be easier. So now with Flare 12, whatever your master language project is, that can become the control project. The control project can then be linked to the translated projects. So now if I go to the English project and I build document 24, that will automatically trigger document 24 to get built in the French project and in the Spanish project. So we can now link our translated projects to our master project. Now what that looks like in Flare, if I do this very quickly, and this is just very rudimentary. So here is a bare basic Flare project. This is all in English right now. But if I go to my target, I have all my normal tabs, but down towards the bottom there's a language tab. In the language tab, my default, this project is in English, but I have, using this little plus sign, I have linked to the French project and the Spanish project. At this point, if I click the build button, it's going to build all 3 projects. Now luckily for me, it's up to date. I'll say no, just show it to me. We'll click View. So here is that project, but there's a special little icon here now, Change Language. That was also added automatically. And yes, you can change the icon, you can move its position, that's all flexible, but I can now choose which language I want to see. So that's brand new as of this release. Okay, the redesigned style sheet editor. Yikes, we're almost out of time. Okay, pulling up Flare real quick. In the style sheet editor, we've always had a good style sheet editor. I'm a huge style fanatic myself. Style, class, and edit. And it was always nice enough to have multiple modes. So there is a basic mode where if you were to come in and say, yeah, I just want to edit the paragraph style, but I don't know anything about CSS. Well, if I double click and I open the paragraph style, it looks just like the Microsoft Word style editor. So we try to give people an easy learning curve to creating their first style sheet. But I will be honest, there's only so much we can do when we're trying to imitate Microsoft Word. So at some point as your skills grow, you're going to want to switch from the simplified view to the advanced view. All I have to do is click on View Simplified and it becomes View Advanced. Now, I'm in a scary place right now. Let me turn some of these off. All right, so this is what our editor looked like traditionally. But what's neat about Flare, I can say, well, I want my paragraphs to be, Arial on the web, but in print, I want Times New Roman. And on a tablet, I want something else. Well, now I can bring up 3 different views. I can bring up tablet, and I can bring up print. So now I can see all 3 settings at the same time. And so right now I can see under print, it's Times New Roman. Under tablet, it looks like it's Arial. And then under default, my web, it's Arial. If for some reason on a tablet, I want my paragraphs to render using green text, well, I can change this. And now I can see that for the web, it's black. For the PDF, it's black. But on a tablet, my paragraphs would switch to a green color. So you would just have a level of stylistic control that's just almost crazy. All right, so that's the style editor. Yikes, down to 2 minutes. The custom responsive layout editor. All right, we're probably going to end up finishing here. For snippets and variables and preserve track changes, again, that's covered in that previous recording fairly in depth if you want to look that one up. But the responsive layout editor is so cool, I want to take a minute for that, and then we'll finish up. All right, so before I even show it, I want to set the stage here. When you or I look at a web page, I just pulled Google up here real quick, we see a single page. And traditionally, that is how it was treated. So if you wanted to do any fancy responsive design techniques, you pretty much had to be a master cascading style sheet coder. It got pretty technical pretty quick. But there's something brand new. These different things like Google Bootstrap, the Zurb Foundation, there are now these kind of platforms that can be used to make responsive design a whole lot easier. Now, in Flare, we've adopted the Zurb Foundation. What that means is this is not one big single page anymore. You can't see it, but imagine this page being broken into 12 vertical columns. So if I want something to take up the full width of the page, I just say width 12. If I want something to take up half the page, I say width 6. I'm not dealing with pixels. I'm not dealing with crazy percentages. It's just how wide do I want something? I tell it how many columns I want it to fill. So that's the idea behind the foundation. Here's how it works in Flare. If I can find the correct Flare project. Oh, there it is. All right, so here I have a page. Now let me turn off my positioning. So what I have happening on this page is I have a blue graphic that says happy, which is inside of a div container. I have a red graphic, which is inside of another div container. And I have a gray graphic, dark gray, inside of a div container. But more importantly, all of that content is wrapped in one parent div container. What I've basically done using these div elements, I've almost created a table. But the difference is a div is flexible. It can be restyled on the fly, whereas a table is much more rigid. So what I can do with this, let me make some space here and pull up my responsive layout window now that's brand new. Well, right now, if I put my cursor on the blue icon, because the way its div is set for web mode, cell width 4. It's going to be 4/12 of the width of the screen, or 1/3 of the screen. If I go into tablet mode, cell width is still 4. And if I go to mobile mode, cell width is 12. So what I've just done, if I preview this in my web browser now, well, in desktop mode, each graphic is 1/3 the width of the screen, but it's the full-size graphic. As soon as I get down to tablet mode, each graphic is still 1/3 of the width of the screen, but I've gone into my style sheet, and in tablet mode, I said make the graphics 80% of their full size. So it's still, they're all side by side, but desktop, full-size graphics, tablet, smaller graphics. But those won't even fit on a phone. So if it goes into phone mode, well, now they go back to full width graphics, but each graphic is set to a width of 12 in phone mode. So now they stack up vertically, and that way they will work on my smartphone. And I realized that was really kind of quick and fast, but that's the idea. We can actually select any content, tell it how many 12ths of the width of the screen to use, and I'm not digging around in any code trying to set up responsive design. But with that, I'm about 4 minutes long, so let me wrap up with a couple of announcements. Coming up this Sunday, I believe there are about 7 slots left if it's a last-minute thing, but we still have a couple of openings in MadWorld coming up next week. And as a thank you for participating in this webinar, if anybody is interested in taking any of our certified training classes, we have 2 classes coming up, and the company is offering a discount to anybody that attended this webinar. Just call up your salesperson, tell them you attended this. We have a record of all the email addresses. They can look it up and verify. But with that, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. I hope my colleagues got to all the questions that I didn't get to. If we missed your question, just shoot that to sales@madcapsoftware.com, and we will get you guys answers. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.